What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to break down a few little things, go into a deep dive. But if you're new to the podcast, we have shows kind of within the shows where we go in and actually talk a little bit about just rants or things that kind of come up on topics. And recently, been uh, more aware of some posts that I've seen on social media. So I've been kind of doing rants on those. But then we also have full-length interview conversations. Those are with experts, athletes, or coaches to help you get in the zone or what their zone is. And they're trying to explain that and help us stay in the zone as a player or coach, right? Then we have the mental minute, those quick mental game hacks help elevate your performance. And then, like I said, today we're going to that deep dive. It's a little more educational, more exploring into the small little nitty gritty things that help you stay in the zone and perform at your best or your athletes at your best. But if you got a question, topics, suggestions, if you're looking at this on any of the platforms, feel free to text the platform right underneath there in the show notes. It says to send a text message. That'll go to the platform, not my direct number, but I'll be able to see all of those for any suggestions you want, or you can email it or shoot us a DM or comment on any platform that you see this podcast. So for this one, we're going to go into a little bit of energy systems. Okay. And what I mean by for energy systems, and I kind of want to debunk a little bit of a myth that I've had in the past. And then as I got further into my coaching career, I was able to figure out, oh, hey, this actually wasn't true. Right. So we all know of the different types of energy systems. And if you're not, I'll just kind of briefly review over those. Okay. So if you're watching, you will be able to see there's the ATP, there's the phosphagen energy system, glycolytic, and oxidative. Best way to kind of describe these, ATP is kind of more like a thimble, right? That's going to be a little bit over anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds-ish. And even then, it's probably maybe less than that, right? The phosphagen system, that's going to be a little bit longer, a little bit further into those bouts, right? And that lactate threshold, excuse me, is a little bit further out. So that's about 1 to 2 minutes. Glycolytics a little bit more into 3 minutes, and then oxidative is anything more than that, 5-minute range, right? Again, and I'm estimating some of these times here, but to just kind of point that out, and you're able to see all of that on these energy systems. And used to, I would think, hey, as soon as that ATP or that 10 seconds runs, boom, it just completely shuts off. But it's not necessarily true. What we've found is there's a lot of research out there that says that these energy systems still stay on, and they'll have different bouts here and there, but I'll show the chart here for this one too, right? So it's not going to completely go away. Whereas before we thought, hey, it just completely tanked after those seconds, but that ATP PC system, right? The ATP and phosphagen system, it goes all the way and starts to kind of really taper down at about that 50-second range. Okay, but you got 10 to 15 seconds of a burst where that ATP is really, really kicking in, but it starts to slow down, but it's still providing energy, right? So it's not an all or none type of system. But the anaerobic, right? That's that glycolytic system is whenever you're doing some more intense, high intensity intervals of training that you're doing, right? Stop and go, but you're continuing to move. Those are still on, and that peaks again right at about 50 seconds, but can still kind of taper off, still go into 120 seconds or into the 310 seconds, right? 3 to 5 minute range. But the aerobic system, right? It starts to increase. And what my misconception was like, hey, we don't ever need to train the aerobic system. And again, not trying to say that we need to train running poles or, doing very monotonous stuff, but having some type of aerobic training is good, right? And some of those research in team sport, right, like for soccer, basketball, rugby, shows that athletes with a higher aerobic capacity can maintain a higher intensity work rate throughout an entire game. Again, different sports, but there is something to be said there where if you do have that, you can actually repeat a lot of those high intensity things. So think of it in baseball terms. If you're trying to be a starter and you're only able to go 2-3 innings and then your velo tanks and you don't have any aerobic base, then you're probably kind of missing the boat a little bit on that to kind of help you increase your overall endurance. How you go about doing that could be totally different than just running poles, though, right? You can have various volume, right? Increasing that workload of those quick spouts over and over and over again, where you're tapping into all the energy systems to be able to hit that at your best, right? But to my point, you don't want to just do only one, right? You need to have a little bit more of a wide array. And again, a lot of the focus, I would say probably 80% of the things that you're going to do in a really good structured program for a baseball athlete is within that ATP PC system, right? That's going to be the one where, hey, you're sprinting fast, explosive, fast movements, no reps, heavier or too much to where you're going to be tapping into the wrong energy system. The more you train in that and the more volume you do, the better off you're going to be. However, if you only do that, that's where guys get into trouble, where their mitochondrial density. So if you go back to science class, what's the powerhouse of the cell? Mitochondria, right? If that doesn't have as much density, right? Those functions, the way the muscles or the ability for that to improve is going to be very, very limited. If you're only training in 3 sets of 10, or hey, I'm only doing explosive stuff for maybe, 8 to 10 reps, it's not going to cut it, right? Add on more sets, add on maybe more rest time, but instead of doing 3 sets of 10, maybe you do 10 sets of 3. See where I'm going with this, right? So you can kind of flip the script, and this is how some of my training is evolved to where I'm getting away from really hardly anything of the 3x10, unless it's something very, very, like bicep curls or something that's more to failure. And again, depending on the goal of what you're trying to get out of your sessions, right? But if your point is to try to increase recovery, right, and increase the bouts of high intensity efforts, you're going to need some type of aerobic efficiency. So you can't get smoked whenever you just, go on a walk for 20 minutes. And if you're huffing and puffing, like, yeah, dude, we probably need to work on this just a little bit, right? But also a big part of that for the recovery is oxygen delivery, right? How your body's going to replenish and recover, right? Getting blood flow to all those regions. So if your heart rate, you're sticking around zone 2, right? If you're familiar with those different types of zones, zone 1 would be a specific percentage of your heart rate, and then all the way up to zone 5, which is max. But zone 2 is kind of a little bit, for me, is like anywhere from 120 to 139. Okay. And if I'm able to do that, my heart rate is able to help shed weight, or maybe just have good general heart health, right? Like that's what we're looking to do. If that heart health is not getting blood flow to the rest of my body, right, and my heart health is down, then of course my performance could go down. You don't necessarily have to worry about that too much early on, but especially later on in your career, later in college, definitely for the pro guys, you're going to need to kind of consider that a little bit, because that max heart rate does go down as you age, right? The formula for that is 220 minus your age, and that's about what your max heart rate should be, right? Our healthy max heart rate. Why they came up with that, I'm not really sure why 220 minus your age works, but again, this is just kind of all based off of other studies that's happened on just particular aerobic exercise. So again, I'm not advocating for you to go run and join a marathon and do a bunch of aerobic stuff. I don't think that's the point that I'm trying to get across. But if you don't do anything aerobically, right? And one of my favorites is the contralateral circuit. I'll add that in the show notes for you guys to check out. But it's a circuit where you're kind of going through things. You have a rest and work ratio where you're trying to move things. And again, contralateral being right arm, left leg, or left arm, right leg, right? Or think of like a dead bug, those different types of things and different movements that you can do to help generate blood flow to your body. I know I said blood flow a lot, but that's essentially what you need whenever you're trying to recover, is getting more blood flow to certain areas, right? So you could also do this in other types of intervals, whether that's a bike or a rower, right? Whatever you're going to be motivated to do or be able to stick with, or maybe even mix it up, right? Sometimes you can, do certain things like think of an interval for an Aerodyne bike, right? 15 seconds of just max effort, 45 seconds of just chilling, right? You can do that. If you can do that for 7 rounds, I'd say your aerobic capacity is doing pretty well, and you might feel a little fried after, but that's one way you could do things. Another, depending on what you have available, you could do some mobility work in there in between those intervals, right? Bunch of different creative ways on how to do it. But if you have any questions, or maybe you want to run something by me, hey, that's what this text message down there in the bottom is for, or feel free to reach out on any platforms that you see. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up this deep dive of the aerobic capacity and kind of debunking that myth of no aerobic versus anaerobic, or having a combination of both. So appreciate you tuning in, and stay in the zone.